Hello and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at. It is Election Day in Illinois. We'll have a live report with the latest on voter turnout, plus when we can expect to see some results after polls close. Plus, what are some of the key races to watch tonight and what they could mean for November midterms?
In Chicago, when you feed your ballot into a machine on Election Day, you're essentially putting it in a ballot box with two compartments.
And what exactly happens to your ballot after you vote? We explain. First off tonight, the big day is finally here as voters across Illinois cast ballots in the primary election. Residents across the state are weighing in on a number of key races, including some statewide races like the hotly contested Democratic primary for U.S. Senate. Polls close at 7 tonight, but if you're still in line, stay in line because anyone who's there at 7 p.m. has the right to cast a ballot. We'll have much more on the races and voter turnout coming up in the program. And we should also note we will be live at 10 p.m. tonight to bring you results after polls close. A Chicago firefighter with just under 2 years' experience on the force has died while on duty.
We are heartbroken by yet another loss of our own. Michael gave everything in service to the people of Chicago, and we will never forget his courage and sacrifice. Our deepest condolences go out to the Altman family, fellow firefighters, friends, and all that loved him and knew him.
Fire Commissioner Annette Nance Holt says 32-year-old Michael Altman was assigned to Truck 47 in Edgewater. A fundraising page for Altman's family says he was conducting a primary search of the building yesterday in the 1700 block of West North Shore Avenue in Rogers Park when he fell through the floor into a room fully engulfed in flames. He was taken to the burn unit at Stroger but died of his injuries today. The fundraising page says he has one young child and his wife is expecting another. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. Charlie XCX, John Summit, Olivia Dean, the Smashing Pumpkins, just a few of the headliners named for this summer's Lollapalooza Summer Festival, announced today.
If you don't know it, that's okay. We can help you learn it.
The annual Music Fest takes place in Grant Park July 30th through August 2nd. Other performers include K-pop groups like Cordis, also Somber, 5 Seconds of Summer, and Lil Uzi Vert, adding up to more than 100 artists on 8 stages. This year, the 4-day festival is adding several premium hospitality experiences, including suites and a speakeasy lounge. Pre-sale tickets start this Thursday. And for more on today's election and how the voter turnout is shaping up, we're joined by Joanna Hernandez, who's live at the Chicago Board of Elections super site along State Street. Joanna, how are things running so far?
Brandis, things seem to be running pretty smoothly here. We do see a line along State Street, but like I just said, you can see this line is going in and out. That just goes to show the people who are working here and the operation that they have here is running pretty smoothly. And here to talk about this year's midterm elections is Max Bever. Come over here, Max Bever. He's the Director of Public Information at the Board of Elections. Thank you for joining us. You are the man who's in charge of all the numbers. No pressure.
One of many.
One of many. How would you describe this year's early elections?
So we were heading into this election like a lion, but we might be exiting like a lamb. We saw really record-breaking early voting and vote-by-mail ballots being returned before Election Day. Election Day's been a little bit sleepier, but as you can see, we're seeing a surge in our later hours like we usually see for a primary election. We're going to beat 2022's numbers, but we might not beat 2018's. We're going to fall probably somewhere in between. 2018 had 32% citywide turnout. 2022 had 22% citywide turnout. And to remember, we do have many vote-by-mail ballots that still need to be counted, so tens of thousands.
Any trends or patterns that you're seeing now?
So trends, yes. We've seen women lead the way so far today, but it's also been an election that's been driven by older voters, especially 55 and up. That's pretty traditional for primary elections. But we are seeing a surge of voters in our last 2 hours and a lot more younger voters under 30 that are showing up in these last 2 hours.
I mean, that's really interesting. Also, talk to me about the people who work here. What training do poll workers get leading up to an election day?
So what you're seeing are people who are early voting officials who are also serving on election day. These are people at the super site. They've already been working for 4 weeks. geeks. They're the ones that are always the most camera friendly. But when it comes to our election judges, they receive at least 4 hours of training, even when you're a standby judge. And we've had standby judges put in all of our polling places today to make sure that we were fully staffed. And thankfully, we've seen a smooth and safe election, and dare I say, just a little bit boring. But we like to see boring over at the Board of Elections.
But I can imagine they're also working hard. These are some similar faces that I've seen before.
That's right.
So it just goes to show.
We're lucky enough to have early voting officials join us year after year. They love the super site downtown, and that's why they come back to us year after year.
And let's talk about misinformation. How do you safeguard against misinformation about elections?
That's very tough, and we know that like a day like Election Day, we're not tracking everything that's out on social media. So we do our best to put out the right information. So no matter what, you should be checking chicagoelections.gov for all information. Don't trust that Facebook page that you see or what somebody might be reporting. You can always come to us, give us a call at 312-269-7900, or visit our website.
That's a good point, because a lot of people seem to be going to Facebook sometimes, but it's good to double check.
It's natural, but you should be going to your election authority to confirm all information.
Now let's talk about mail-in ballots. We know that more people are voting through mail. Now, how is the Chicago Board of Elections addressing risk to mail-in ballots after the United States Postal Service changed how postmarks are being dated?
So part of those record-breaking numbers we saw for pre-election voting was a lot of vote-by-mail ballots coming back. That showed us that Chicagoans have heeded that warning. They were mailing their ballots much earlier in the process, and that we've seen our secure Dropbox numbers really go up post-March 10th. So I think Chicago got the message. So if you're still a vote-by-mail voter and you have that ballot, you're planning on returning it before 7 p.m., hit that Dropbox. There's 52 locations across the city.
Now this is a question that everybody wants to know. How fast can people expect results tonight?
So you're going to see the initial results start coming in around 7:15 p.m. Now it's important to know these are unofficial results. We still have a 2-week counting period after Election Day where vote-by-mail ballots that are properly postmarked or arrived a secure Dropbox that will be counted. There's probably tens of thousands of those. So we ask for a little bit of patience as some of these races are close. It might come down to that 2-week counting period. But you're going to see results updated all night at chicagoelections.gov.
Well, thank you, Magda, for taking the time.
Thank you.
Brandis, we send it back to you.
All right, Joanna, I'm sure you'll be keeping an eye on it for us. Thank you. Up next, what to watch for in some key local races, plus a look at how they play into the national political picture.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Questions over how Illinoisans feel about the direction of the Democratic Party will start to emerge tonight as voters choose between moderate and progressive candidates in a number of congressional races and the race for U.S. Senate. And in this blue city and state, Republican voters are choosing their standard bearers as well, most prominently in races for the GOP nomination for governor and U.S. Senate. Polls are set to close in just over an hour, so joining us now to talk about what's at stake and what might happen tonight are Wayne Stager, a political science professor at DePaul University, Connie Mixon, a political science professor at Elmhurst University, and not university professors, our very own Nick Blumberg and Heather Sharon, professors in their own right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
We'll take what we can get.
Sure.
Seriously, I'll call you Professor something. Connie, so a few states, they have already had their primaries, most notably Texas and North Carolina. What can results of those elections tell us about what we might see from voters today?
Well, I think nationally we're seeing a bit of an enthusiasm gap when it comes to the Republican Party. Democrats are outperforming expectations in red counties and red states. And here in Illinois, we have an unprecedented open Senate seat, 5 open congressional seats, and today is really the whole ballgame because most of these are Democratic districts, a Democratic state, and so the winners of the primary today are the presumptive nominees going into November.
Wayne, what are the Democrats' chances of taking back the House in 2026?
I mean, it's going to be hard fought. I think this typically midterm election,
president's party is going to lose. There's so many headwinds going against Republicans. You've got a lot of retirements, more retirements on the Republican side than the Democratic side. You know, the potential for inflation, the longer the Iran war goes on. You've got interest rates high. You've got turmoil with ICE. I mean, there are so many things that Republicans are going to be fighting.
Would that apply to the Senate as well?
Yeah, the Senate's a little harder. In part, when we talk about the House, we have to realize that gerrymandering is going to play a bigger role this year. There's been a lot of gerrymandered districts, and potentially what it does is dramatically, it's relatively more in large states that are Republican controlled. It's potentially a high-risk strategy for Republicans because they're reducing their potential margin of victory, and if their turnout is low because of a lack of enthusiasm, Democrats could run up a massive national victory. And when I say massive, 38, 40, 45 seats, and clearly take control of the House. Whether that'll happen, there's a lot to play out. But in the Senate, at best case scenario, it's going to be very close.
Connie, following Kamala Harris's loss to Trump back in 2024, of course, there was a lot of discourse among Democrats about which way the party should be going next. What could the results of today's election signal about what Democratic voters want from their party ahead of the November midterms?
I think we're seeing that divide still within the Democratic Party between, the more centrist Democrats and the further left progressive Democrats. I still think that's an open question going into this primary, but I think the most important takeaway is that we're seeing generational change with this election in Illinois. We've got Dick Durbin, who was our U.S. Senator, Jan Schakowsky, Danny Davis, in their 80s. They've been serving for 20, 30 years, and we have an opportunity in this election to send younger and potentially more progressive representatives to Washington.
Nick and Heather, bringing you both in because you're going to be reporting live tonight from the headquarters of candidates who are representing two different wings of the Democratic Party, really. Nick, you're going to be at Representative Raja Krishnamurthy's headquarters later today. Tell us about the kind of Democrat that Krishnamurthy is and a little bit about his campaign.
That's right. Certainly Raja Krishnamurthy is someone who's seen as much more of a centrist, much more of a moderate Democrat as compared to some of the other more progressive folks within the Democratic Party. And he's really stressed that he has the ability to reach out to a wide variety of voters. He was originally born in India, but moved as a young man to Illinois, lived in Peoria for a long time, represents a large swath of suburban districts with more centrist, moderate Democrat voters. Some voters that probably were Republicans perhaps 10 years ago. So he is someone who has really tried to emphasize that, and he got out of the gate early. Went into it with a very large campaign war chest as a prolific fundraiser, was out with ads early July of last year. So he's really had a lot of name recognition out of the gate, was an early favorite in the polls because of that name recognition, although things have gotten much tighter with Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, who is certainly to his left, making the race much more interesting in recent weeks.
July of last year, have we really been doing this for that long? Because Heather, you are going to be going to Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton's headquarters, another one of the Democrats, of course, running for the Democratic Senate nomination. Tell us about how she fits into the modern Democratic Party and her bid for the Senate.
Well, she hopes that Democratic voters will turn out because they want a fighter. She is somebody who wants people to think if you want to send somebody to the Senate to fight Trump, to fight the Republicans, she wants to be your candidate. And I think the clearest, distinction between the two candidates has been Representative Krishnamurthy saying that he would abolish Trump's ICE, while Juliana Stratton wants to dismantle ICE entirely and has left open the possibility of dismantling the Department of Homeland Security in total. 99.9% of the votes that either candidate casts if they're elected will be the same. So it's a difference in approach. But Juliana Stratton is hoping that the vibes, for lack of a better term, are in favor of somebody who does not sort of emphasize reaching across the aisle the way that Representative Krishnamurthy does, or, for that matter, Robin Kelly, who's also running, who also has touted her experience in Congress. She's been there for 13 years. She says, I'm somebody who can get things done Is that what Democrats want? We're going to find out a little bit more tonight.
Let's talk about Robin Kelly a little bit more, because she is, from the 2nd district, 2nd congressional district. She's also one of the 3 front runners, but she's sort of the 3rd of these 3 front runners. Wayne, tell us a little bit about her candidacy, please.
Yeah, I mean, she represents a very traditional urban constituency, and her issues focusing on education, social welfare programming. Gun control is probably, she's the strongest candidate of the 3 in terms of emphasizing that. It's hard when she's running behind in finance, campaign finance. She's being outspent by Raja by about 10 to 1 and probably 3, maybe 4 to 1 by Stratton. So, she's, even though she has a strong experience record compared to the other 2, she's relatively invisible beyond the Chicago area.
What do you see as the path to victory for these candidates?
The hard part about primaries is turnout. And so we're really good at predicting who's going to vote for whom. We're not very good at predicting who's going to turn out to vote in a given year. We can look at individuals and demographics of people who are more likely to vote, but, and Connie can tell you, it's really variable from election to election. And so the critical issue in the Democratic Party is it going to be more your traditional repeat habitual voters who tend to be a little older? Are you going to see more progressives turning out? And that's really going to make a big difference across all of these races. And when I say progressives, it's not just young people. All right, young people generally tend not to vote in these primaries. Progressives, age doesn't discriminate or differentiate between who's progressive and who's liberal in the Democratic Party. It actually has more to do with religiosity. So people who are church attenders tend to be the more traditional Democrat versus non-church attenders are definitely in the progressive camp.
Connie, we've also got several U.S. House primaries being decided today, some with as many as 15 candidates running for that seat or running for that nomination. Which races are you watching, or what are you keeping an eye on?
I'm watching all of them. I think they're all really important. It's hard to narrow them down, but, certainly looking at the 2nd and the 8th, there's the possibility for representatives that previously had represented those districts actually, returning to office. You have Melissa Bean in the 8th Congressional District. You have Jesse Jackson Jr. in the 2nd Congressional District. But when you have all of these candidates, 8, 10, 13 candidates in these races, we're likely to end up with somebody winning with just a plurality of the vote, not a majority of the vote.
Yeah, that's what we're going to end up with.
Yeah.
Heather, okay, I want to see if we can get to 2 other races really quickly. Cook County Board President race, tell us, what might that race be? Tell us about the power of different voting blocks within the county.
Well, we heard Connie say that there's generational change. Toni Preckwinkle is sure hoping that she is the exception to the rule rather than that rule, because she turns 79 today. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Toni Preckwinkle.
And she is facing a much younger challenger in Alderman Brendan Riley. He is also much more conservative than she is, and he is hoping that after 4 terms in office, Cook County says we're ready for somebody different. He is somebody who's sort of slammed her for problems with the property tax system and says that there needs to be a new approach to criminal justice in Cook County. It will be interesting to see sort of on a micro level what that race means for the Cook County Democratic Party, and I will be looking to that race to sort of help me understand what we're facing in 2027 during the aldermanic and mayoral elections that are just over the hill. Brandis, I know you were very
another
excited.
one coming right up.
Yes.
All right, Nick, in this race still, though, we've got the comptroller. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker has prominently backed one of 4 candidates. That's Margaret Croak. What more could this race tell us about his influence in state Democratic politics?
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see whether his influence translates to direct endorsements in some of these marquee races. Certainly, he, has a leader of the state Democratic Party, who he helped install. He's a major funder of the party and of campaigns here. But, you know, having the open controller seat and having this open Senate seat where he endorsed his Lieutenant Governor Stratton, it'll be a test to see whether folks are following his lead in terms of who he wants to see take over. Of course, outgoing controller Susana Mendoza, she has endorsed Lake County Treasurer Holly Kim. Mendoza, a very popular statewide candidate, often one of the top vote getters, if not the top vote getter in statewide elections. So certainly someone with a long history of connecting with voters and a lot of sway. Of course, there's also Karina Villa, a state representative who's been very out front as a progressive anti-ICE candidate, state senator, I should say, Villa, and state representative Stephanie Kiefowitz. So be interesting to see whether Pritzker's sort of hand-picked choices are following the influence that his money and, you know, his leadership has.
And Susana Mendoza outgoing. It'll be interesting if we see her in that election that you mentioned next year. Heather Sharon, Nick Blumberg, Wayne Stager, and Connie Mixon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Up next, we check back in with Joanna Hernandez at the Board of Elections. Cook County Elections got an upgrade today. In a partnership with No Inc., County Clerk Monica Gordon unveiled a new real-time election analytics platform. Platform is meant to optimize elections and increase trust. Joanna was at Clerk Gordon's office where they showcased this technology. Joanna, explain us how this platform works.
Brandis, well, first off, they're very excited about it, and it's called the Election Lens, and basically it can analyze real-time voting. And as you mentioned, Brandis, this is a partnership with the company called No Inc., and it's a platform they say they've been working on for years. It's a real-time election analytics platform. They say it is the first of its kind in the nation, feeding data directly from polling pads into the platform. They can see how many people are voting throughout the Cook County suburbs. It's really interesting. You could even track the areas with higher turnout versus those with lower turnout. We did notice the suburb of Cicero is experiencing a very low turnout, while Evanston and Oak Park have higher voting turnouts. As of now, it is tracking the gubernatorial primary with plans to expand it for other elections. Now, the Cook County Clerk ensures no additional data beyond what is already collected will be used for the platform. They say the goal is to optimize elections and increase trust.
What we've done here is we're looking to use this data to operationalize, to make sure the voters have confidence, to make sure that when our front desk gets a phone call about a mail ballot, they can answer the question real time without transferring a call and going to voicemail, where we could be more efficient and voters have more confidence.
Now, this is still in beta with the goal of possibly also operating by the November elections. But, Brandis, they are calling this a game changer. Reporting live inside the Supercenter, I'm Joanna Hernandez. I send it back to you.
Joanna, thank you. Up next, what actually happens to your ballot after you vote? We explain. So you did your homework on the candidates, found your polling place where you may have waited in a long line, but what happens to your ballot after you cast it? As part of our series WTTW News Explains, we explore the journey of a Chicago ballot. Here's Amanda Vinicky.
You've done your research, made your choices, cast your ballot. Then you cast a couple more on behalf of your dead relatives. Hey, it's the Chicago way. Just kidding. So, you earned your I voted sticker. What happens next? In Chicago, when you feed your ballot into a machine on Election Day, you're essentially putting it in a ballot box with two compartments. Ballots with write-in candidates stay separate in one compartment. Election judges will count these by hand at the end of the night. All other ballots are scanned and counted by machine. Lucky for the judges, otherwise it would be a lot of counting. Once the polls close, the machine spits out a tape of the totals, like a receipt. Election judges work in bipartisan teams at each precinct to keep an eye on everything. They certify things went smoothly and that ballots weren't compromised when they sign the receipts and other legally binding documents. Then they use a cellular device to transmit the totals downtown to Election Central. That's when we begin to see the results. But it's not all high-tech. The paper ballots that got fed into the machine don't get tossed. They go into a big blue hard-shell case on wheels, packed up with a pretty bow, or rather a security seal, to ensure nobody messes with the precious cargo. From then on, anyone who touches the case has to sign a chain of custody form, like evidence in one of those TV procedural dramas. Thousands of suitcases from every Chicago precinct go to a warehouse where they stay, signed, sealed, delivered, for at least 22 months, just in case. Some will be opened and reviewed as an extra check. By law, a state audit recounts votes from 5% of all precincts. Procedures differ slightly for voting by mail, early voting, and those who vote from overseas, but not by much. All legitimate ballots are counted, kept secure at every turn, and end up in the same warehouse for safekeeping. So, wear that sticker with pride and peace of mind. Happy voting.
You can watch more from our Emmy Award-winning series WTTW News Explains on our website. And that's our show for now. Check out our website for the very latest from WTTW News, including up-to-the-minute election coverage and results. And we will be back live tonight at 10 p.m. with live coverage from some of the candidates' election night parties and to break down today's results. But for now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and we will see you later tonight at 10.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is a multilingual law firm, providing translators for a variety of languages.